Since we are using a reverb that doesn't have a huge echo, depth, or distance when you look at it, in the mix it actually creates a very subliminal effect. Let's say it's a bit more vintage. Even more. For example, we can enhance the reverb effect during the breakdown part of our track, which is where we build up to the peak, and then, which we call the drop. We can enhance this effect through the lead. Let's really bring this towards the end, specifically regarding reverb. Great. Let's emphasize it a bit more with delay. I wanted to say something about the border return. There are 2 here, but in total there are up to 12 different ones. Return. Insert, return track. For example, when you right-click here, you can use up to 12 different return tracks here or there. So it's possible to use different delays, reverbs, or various effects at different times here and actually run it like an aux. Let's add that right away. For example, one that we use in the kick channel. Let's use the auto filter this time on the master channel. So let's really make a DJ transition there. Like this. Again, the frequency is like this, not high cut, but low cut. Let's open it from max. This time, let's do a slightly different application. So we will completely eliminate the bass frequencies here. We will be eliminating it. Let's quickly do a show. Automation on this yellow button. Let's select this part and this part. It's on here and off the rest. So let's make it on and off just for this breakdown part. And here, again in the frequency section, we can say a show automation or a new lane. Here too, from minimum to maximum. Let it be for a transition. So actually, when you look at it, it's something where we've really eliminated the bass sound, and then with the drop coming in, the bass effect has increased even more. Let's create it. Let's say it's a dramatic effect. It will be like this. It's not this much, it's this and that. Maybe up to 2 kilohertz. Yes, after adding some movement to our track through automation. After adding movement, we can move on to mastering. This is our final stage. One of the things I just wanted to mention about automation, under normal circumstances, for example, when we open this channel, we can see our automation parameters. If we click on one of them, we can see it here, just like we are. After a while, for example, when we want to make a change, like an arrangement, the red lines here, the automation things, can be a bit confusing. Normally there's a keyboard icon located in the upper right corner here, if you remember. This allowed us to play MIDI notes from our computer's keyboard. This needs to be closed for what I'm about to show you, so please don't overlook this. If you press the A key, as you can see, the automations completely disappear. So it's more comfortable, a less complex image. And when you press the A key again, if you want to make a change related to automation, you can see it here. So the automation parameter is actually turned on and off with this A key. We're pressing A without any shortcut, meaning without holding down the control key. What I just want to say is, don't overlook this. Something like this. The keyboard indicator needs to be off. And sometimes the confusing thing will be this. So we selected the parameter here. We wanted to create a sensation for that moment. How did it sound before we did this automation? Like this. Actually, we have automation here. We wrote it down at the very beginning. If you remember, let's say we set this to on. Then let's say it stays like that. Let's say we created such a sensation, then we decided to back out, so let's not do it this way. ETC. Again, I want you to pay attention to this. Here, look, a red button has just appeared. The OK button has been created. This means this. This means that any automation in this parameter or written down is currently not active. The on and off for automations works like this. For example, if you press this button, as you can see again, the automation, this has now come into play. This is also a somewhat confusing concept. For example, the shortcut we created using the A key, Ableton. It wasn't there in 10, but with Ableton 11, something like this has entered our lives. This is also a troubleshooting. I wanted to show this in advance in case we encounter a potential problem. Then let's do a must think. In mastering, from the very beginning, I mentioned the concept of headroom while doing gain staging. As you remember, when we say play, our track will again reach its highest. Let's get to the one that is. Let's create a loop here again. Let's select like this. Let's take a loop, play. Now, I mentioned at the beginning when we were doing the staging that we leave the headroom, which is around -6, -4, and -5, especially paying attention to it for mastering. Let's think of it as if our interplanetary journey is continuing. Mastering is a completely different area of expertise and is truly a bottomless pit of a topic. Let me try to show you the basic concepts here again. In mastering 2, as with most everything we use, it is actually a compressor. Let's visually see the total signal that will come to us from the compressor a bit here. Look, this threshold level, which is the same threshold level I mentioned before, is currently up here, but our sound frequency is progressing down here. This means, so, our compressor is currently not active. We are this. As we bring the sound frequency closer, we start to lower this blue line, that is the threshold, downwards. Our compressor will have kicked in. Here we can instantly see the effect that the compressor is applying. Look, it provides us with something really nice. After applying the compressor process, meaning the pads you see here, these are all pads originating from the key. And I mentioned that there are 3 different interfaces here. This is, for example, a more classic view. Here, look, the gain reduction, shown as GR, indicates how much processing the compressor is doing. For example, we have lowered the threshold quite a bit. For example, let's keep this at around -20 levels. So we can also take a reference from here visually. Let's apply a light compression. The compressor is not active. We've experienced volume loss. Here we have the out. For example, let's move on to the out section. Let's assume we've lost about 2 dB here. We've raised the total volume from -6 to -3. The compressor is off. Great. When talking about mix tools, I mentioned the compressor and EQ, and there's also a third one, the saturator. We have been using saturator frequently in recent years, especially in the last 10 years or so, both on all channels separately and on MassLink. It's one of the extremely favorite elements we use in the process. The function of the saturator is this. If you are interested in photography, you need a saturation. There is a concept of giving to colors. We are applying this saturation in the same way to frequencies here. Instead of increasing the volume or loudness on the existing frequencies, you can think of it as a plugin that adds extra frequencies in terms of coefficients, actually providing a saturation to the sound in the truest sense of the word. We use the saturator a lot. It's actually one of the popular tools that helps us capture that warmth found in old analog mixes. I didn't use it on the channels here. But for example, I wanted to include both the saturator and show what it does in the mastering channel, meaning in our mastering chain, the saturator is currently off. Our saturator is on. We didn't observe any difference. Here in the saturator, we have different options. For example, when we say soft sine, we might have heard that the volume increases. There's quite a difference, like between day and night. For example, if we want to exaggerate a bit more, we can move to the medium curve. These are actually the degrees of the saturator. Quite assertively. You see, we haven't increased the volume at all, so the mastering is still at 0. For example, our peaks started to move from -6s to +0s, 0s and 1s as a result of the operations we carried out. We'll address that now. But as you can hear, the mastering process is a stage that brings the overall loudness, that is, the volume, and the way it is heard to the forefront. In total, it gave us a return. Now, to prevent the peaks that are starting to form here, you can see there's a soft clip button. Right now, when we turn it on, it's off, just like we saw in this compressor right here. The boosted frequencies are actually due to the transient of this kick, that is, the intensity of its attack at the first moment of entry. Is rising, has added value in the mix, but the soft clip really acts like trimming those. It ensures that it never goes above 0 dB, and as you can see, since we turned on the soft clip, this area has completely stopped peaking. In fact, it still leaves us with a threshold, headroom of almost -1 dB. We can observe. Here, for example, is the last part of our mastering chain, and again, it's one of the popular tools. We can activate the limiter. In the limiter, we have a ceiling level here. For example, when this is set to the default of -0.30, let's change it to -0.10. And no matter what process we apply here, our audio signal will never exceed -0.10. Let's observe this right away. As a result of the processes we've done, we still have a -0.70 here. We can see that there's almost a 1 dB level. Here, for example, let's do a little bit of a boost. Every channel, let's say we boost it by about 0.2 or 0.3. And let's try to fill this headroom here, which we intentionally left at the beginning, by bringing it up to the maximum level. As I mentioned earlier, we won't be able to exceed -0.10 at all, thanks to the ceiling setting of this limiter we used with the master link. We still have a bit of space. This time I'm increasing the drive on the saturator. Drive is definitely not the same as volume. You can think of it as a little bit of distortion. Here we have another color option. This can stay closed. We still have some space. Let's make it 3 dB. Here, if necessary, we might get another 1 dB of help from our compressor. A total of 3 dB. Let's open the audio. So if you notice, we have obtained a very nice and rich piece in terms of loudness. So, if you go back to the beginning of the video, and compare it with the volumes we made for the first, Genselic, you will see that there is a huge difference. But there was already a certain planning from the very beginning. Our reason for progressing was based on knowing the point we would ultimately reach from the very beginning. So, up to this point we've made all our choices based on a certain principle. Normally, these will somehow go hand in hand during the production phase of the piece as time progresses. So, at the same time, even when you start the project, you'll still be doing gain staging, Here's the EQ, the compressor, and more. When you select or work with the loop, you'll find yourself automatically starting to process it. But the fundamental principle is that we always leave some headroom, and then you should aim to get this as close to 0 dB as possible during mastering. You'll be progressing with a principle like that all the time. I think it's fantastic. As I mentioned before, as we started using more plugins, for example, right now I'm recording the screen at the same time, and when we hit play on the CPU here, it's gradually increasing and even starting to cause slowdowns and stutters, meaning audio dropouts, in our project. As you can see, it's around 27%. When we move to the next segment, it's in the 30s. About the 140s. What I want to show here is this. Just like what we've done here, you've completed all your processes, including EQs and compressors. Let's say here, let's assume we have a lot of plugins on these first 4 channels. You've selected the channel you want to apply. You right-clicked, and there's an option here called Freeze Track. When you freeze, it will freeze all the plugins it has used here. It will be frozen, so it will actually provide us with extra space from one CPU and will demand less from the CPU. Actually, we have 2 options. The first option is when we hover over any channel and right-click, let's say you did a freeze. All plugins used here are frozen, and you gain more CPU, but you've decided to make a change. If you do an unfreeze, you will have reversed the freeze process. The other option is this. Your project has become increasingly crowded. You've used way too many plugins. Even though you freeze it, it still consumes more CPU and your computer is slow. If you do a flatten, it will turn all the selected channel or channels directly into a WAV file. This way, it will convert all the plugins we've used here into a normal WAV file, and you'll gain a significant amount of CPU. So here we have all the plugins we used. You will turn it into a normal WAV file and gain serious CPU. I'm not doing a flatten right now because I will be sharing this project with you. I want you to be able to experiment, make adjustments, and add or remove different things. Now this way. Actually, we are finishing our piece. Then let's give it a listen. Let's continue. Wow. I don't think it's bad. We've worked so hard. We've put in so much effort. We made a piece from scratch. Now let's get to the most fun part of the job. We will definitely want to play this piece for our family and friends. So, before we wrap up the video, let me show you how to export it. Let's start not exactly from the very beginning of the piece, but a little bit before it. For example, let's select a section from 1 bar or half a bar before, and similarly, not from exactly where it ends, but leaving a little bit at the end. When we press Command L or Control L, we activate the loop again. This one, we clicked. So, it has selected the entire piece. It has turned gray over there. The ones here have turned blue. If you press Command-Shift-R or Control-Shift-R, the R of Rise, a window like this will pop up. Export window. Let's keep Render Track Master from the options that opened here. Let's not touch anything else. Convert to mono should definitely be turned off. We're going to do a stereo mode bounce because if your project sample rate is 48, keep it at 48. If it's 44, keep it at 44. Let's leave it at 100. We definitely don't touch the PCM encode and no data options. If you want to export your piece additionally as a WAV file or take it as an MP3, you can activate this on-off option. After you click on Export, you'll be choosing where you want it to export. On your computer, desktop, My Documents, Downloads, etc. Like that. Then you'll give your piece a name and you'll have exported it. And then you'll be able to listen to it and share it with the device you want. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye.